So welcome everyone to the Richmond Planning Commission. This is our meeting for March 20th, 2024. So good to see everyone. We do have a quorum. We hope to have a couple more members join at some point, but we have enough to start. So that's good. We're going to move right in. We want to move right along, hopefully. We'll look at the agenda and see if anyone wants to adjust the agenda in any way. Okay, not seeing anybody volunteering to adjust the agenda, we will proceed with the agenda as published and ask if there is any public comment now on things that are not on the agenda as published.
I would just say that maybe if we started with non-agenda items and then went into agenda adjustment, just in case somebody hops on in the non-agenda items public comment section.
Well, Mark, the problem I have with that is if you ask for public comment on the non-agenda items before you have established what the agenda is, can you see what I'm saying here? If you ask for public comment on non-agenda items and then someone adjusts the agenda, then you have adjusted the public comment ability. So I want to know what the agenda is before I ask for comments on the non-agenda items.
Okay.
That's my strategy, is to find out what the agenda is. Does anyone want to change it? Take something off and then somebody would then have a comment on a non-agenda item.
So that's open to the public too? Review and comments on the agenda? Ah, that makes a lot of sense. And if it's open to the
So, and if a planning commissioner adjusts the agenda and says, we have to get that off the agenda or whatever, we don't have time for that or something, then a guest may subsequently develop a comment about an item that's not on the agenda. So anyway, that's my theory. So I'm going to go with that for now. And
hey, it works. All right.
Yeah. All right. So I do not see any hands being raised for comments on non-agenda items. So we'll go to number 4, which is a review of our February 21st minutes. These are the minutes that we could have reviewed last time, only we didn't have a quorum, so we didn't do that. We're going to review them today. Any comments, corrections, changes anybody wants to make to the February 21st meeting minutes? Okay. We have a phone in person. Whose name?
It's Chris Granda. Can you hear me?
Oh, hi, Chris. Yeah, great. Yeah, you're.
Sorry, I'm in my car for the.
Okay.
I was saying I'm in my car for the next 15 minutes, and then I'll be able to participate more fully.
Okay, great. Glad that you are checking in from the road. So. Okay, so we're going to go next to. So I don't see any hands being raised. Nobody wants to make any comments about the 2:21 minutes. So we're going to accept those into the record as written. And we'll move on to number 5. Number 5 is our annual organizational meeting. Every committee or board has to have an annual organizational meeting. And at this meeting, we elect a chair. And we usually have a vice chair in case the chair is not able to be around for some reason, and also a clerk. And the clerk doesn't appear to be defined in statute, but I think it has to do with the minutes. So I will open the floor for nominations. You can nominate yourself, or you can nominate another commissioner to be chair, vice chair, or clerk. Any of the 3, they can be combined, except the chair and the vice chair probably shouldn't be the same person. That doesn't make any sense. The other role of the vice chair that we've been doing since Adam was vice chair is Adam takes part in the preparation of the agenda, and he's good for there to be more than one planning commissioner who's working with Keith in the beginning to generate an agenda. And so that has been nice. It's been nice to have a collaborator there in the beginning of setting things up. All right, Ian.
I'd like to nominate Virginia to continue to be the chair of the Planning Commission.
Okay, I am willing to do that. And I'm also willing to continue to do the minutes. I find that it's instructive for me. I often learn a lot about what people are saying and meaning, and it reminds me of the views that are out there to do the minutes. So,
I'll second that.
okay, seconded by Mark. Are there any other nominations at this point? Does anyone else desire to have this job?
Silence is deafening.
Yes, so I don't hear any other nominations. So I guess we'll go ahead and vote on this one. All in favor of me being chair should say aye or raise your hand, either one.
Aye.
I,
Okay, all opposed, say no. No one is opposed, so I will accept the role of chair for another year, anyway. Thank you all, yes. How about vice chair? Would anyone like to be the vice chair and to have a little more input in the beginning? I mean, it is a little more work because you're thinking about these things in between meetings rather than just at meetings, but
I nominate Ian Bender to be vice chair of the planning commission.
I'm gonna have to decline on that because I'm still kind of learning the ropes here a little bit.
Best way to learn is get both feet in.
Yeah,
Baptism by fire.
I would fear the day that Virginia can't make a meeting and I actually have to run it. So I think you might be better served by I would nominate Chris Granda with his depth of experience.
okay. Chris, how do you feel about that?
I would second that.
I
Come
I
on.
accept the nomination.
Okay, so Ian
Excellent
nominates, Mark seconds the nomination of Chris as the vice chair. Anyone have any other nominations that we'd like to consider at this point? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote on that. All in favor of Chris Granda as vice chair should raise your hand or say aye, either one.
Aye.
Aye.
Mark, aye.
All right, are there any opposed? Should say nay. No one is opposed, so Chris Granda is the vice chair. Great, thank you all. Okay, and how about the clerk? Does anyone want to be the clerk whose role is a little vague, but so far I'm taking it as doing the minutes primarily and being sure that any communications are taken care of, which mainly is asking Keith to do that. But does anyone want to nominate anybody for that job? I'm only doing this because it's mentioned in statute that a clerk is to be appointed in the planning commission. All right, no one's saying anything, so I will nominate myself as clerk. Is there a second?
I second that.
Seconded by Ian. Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay, there are no other nominations. I hear no other nominations. All in favor of me being appointed clerk should say aye or raise your hand, either one.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Are there any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. I'm the clerk. I'll go on doing the minutes. It's yeah, it's good to watch the meetings over again, archived, and read the transcript because much is learned. So thank you all. All right, so the only other thing that we like to do at our organizational meeting is just have a really brief discussion about what we want to do this year. Is there anything in particular that we want to do this year? We know that we have a number of things going on, trying to work on the Buttermilk situation, trying to work on the residential neighborhoods, these few other things that have come across our agenda. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to it? I, put out a list of kind of our ongoing projects. We are trying to finish the zoning updates before we have to start working on the plan again, which is due to be voted on in 26. So, we've got plenty to do to move along. Mark.
Yes, the rec committee and the 3 parks rec committee, and went before the select board last week. Well, I shouldn't say the rec committee did. The 3 parks went before the select board to discuss having a roundtable regarding volunteer screen zoning and rec opportunities there. And they want to put together the roundtable to discuss the options, maybe clarify the language that causes a lot of confusion in the interpretation of the flood hazard overlay district zoning regulations. So I would like to put that sort of on the agenda, but in awareness of the planning commission, that hopefully we can spend some time talking about some of the details of the flood hazard overlay district modifications that might simplify future development for the park and possibly for the rest of the overlay district.
Okay, we can add that to the list. And Keith, did you tell me that the legislature was also working on the flood hazard standards?
Yeah, I think that what they're working on, and Tyler's more in tune with this than I am, is who is going to have hegemony over development within the floodplains of towns. I think they're discussing that. I'm not 100% up to speed on what the legislature is doing. I really don't have time for that. But Tyler has been keyed into that quite aggressively.
Okay, so that may, we'll have to see where they're at with that, but that may
Right.
come in to the discussion. So, okay, so flood hazard district review, we will put that on the list. All right, anybody else? Anything they want?
I've got one.
Yes.
I would like us to consider actions that the Planning Commission can take to encourage increased energy efficiency and decreased greenhouse gas emissions from buildings in Richmond.
Okay. Okay. And are you talking about building going forward or in general or any of the above? Weatherization?
Well, I think it's within the realm of our jurisdiction, and to the extent that applies to new construction, certainly, but also existing construction when appropriate.
Okay. Okay. All right. We'll add that to the list and we'll make a new list including those items. Thank you, Mark.
If I could just get clarification on, item 9 of the topics. I wasn't quite sure what that was saying.
Oh, okay. So item 9 on the topics. So in our IC discussions and PUD revisions that is coming up at the select board for their public process, we approved those PUD revisions, if you remember, replacing the master development plan with some other language and allowing more residential uses in the IC district. So what we found in that process is that the subdivision regulations have to be made to align with the zoning regulations. We have recommended that master development plan language be revisited, be revised in the zoning regulations. In order for that to really come about, we also have to revise the subdivision regulations because they also refer to the master development plan. PUDs are reviewed under the subdivision regulations. So if we actually want that to stand, we will have to review the subdivision regulations. And in that process, we have said we would like to have standards that can be used to assess whether, especially open space, because that was what our attorney was most concerned about, is the litigation that goes on about open space. We need to have some standards under which open space is reviewed. So that's what that is about. So there are 2 parts to that. One is actually revising the subdivision regs, and the other is actually putting in those standards. Those natural resource standards are going to be relatively complicated. And, there's going to have to be a lot of discussion about it. It mostly affects the AR district, so we could do it at the point that we're reviewing the agricultural residential district. On the other hand, if we want to put them into the subdivision regulations where they could be placed, those standards, then we would want to do it in conjunction with reviewing the subdivision regulations. So I foresee, first of all, we have to wait and see what happens at the select board's public hearing about the removal as it currently stands of that master development plan language from the subdivision regulations. That will not take place until May 6th. If that passes and the zoning goes through with those changes, then we will need to start thinking about how we're going to now align the subdivision regs with the new zoning regs that don't include that language. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Mark?
Yes, I think it does, and it's kind of where I was going is I was hoping that was going to be covering stormwater runoff, particularly in the village area and how that might be impacted. I know I think what this is sort of angling towards is new development, but I also wonder if there aren't things we can do with if not new development in a new house, but then new construction, sort of part and parcel with the past couple of conversations we've had about lot coverage, etc.
Right. Yeah, well, stormwater is a big issue. It's, it is a concern. We need to start thinking about stormwater. And I know Keith and Tyler have been thinking about stormwater.
The natural resource protection component of number 9 is also inclusive of that.
It's inclusive of floodplain, running water. We can.
Forest blocks.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are included in there. Whether stormwater, do we want to think about stormwater as a natural resource protection? It's, it certainly overlaps a lot of development standards. So, I don't know, Keith, if you want to say anything about where we're going with stormwater. We understand that we are going to have more stormwater issues. especially as we increase density. We're going to have more stormwater issues. We're going to have more heavy rain events. So it has definitely got to be on the table. As
Yeah,
a discussion.
my only comment is that the RZR, the Richmond zoning regulations, are pretty much silent on stormwater. I mean, there is certain aspects that the state requires that you have stormwater plans. Specifically now, it's known as the half-acre rule. It used to be the 1 acre rule, but now it's the half-acre rule. If you disturb more than a half acre, you have to have stormwater plan. I would like to get something promulgated in for all developments if it meets a certain threshold. I don't know, square footage, land disturbance, something along those lines. But we don't even discuss erosion and sedimentation either, and that's really the first line of defense. So the RCR is pretty silent on those issues, unless you're doing a commercial project. Then it's pretty much a guarantee the state will have a say in what you're doing.
And, a couple of questions that we can start the discussion by asking are, does this belong in the subdivision regulations or in the zoning regulations? This is a question that I've been thinking about as I put number 9 down on the list. There are some things that, and this is why some towns go to a unified development. And Mark, as you recall, in the 2012 zoning that failed, that was going to be a unified document that had both subdivision regulations and zoning regulations. We can have 2 freestanding documents, that's fine. But certain things, where do they belong exactly? In the subdivision regulations? Does this have to do with the division of land or in the zoning regulation? The other thing that we can think about is that we are empowered by statute to put in any Act 250 standards that we wish. So that is stated in state statutes. So we may want to think about some of those criteria. We may want to look at those criteria and say, are those stormwater criteria and erosion and sedimentation criteria, is that a place that we could lift those from? We may want to have the Regional Planning Commission help us with this project. So, I'm glad that you brought that up, and whether or not it's under number 9, it might be number 10 or 11, but stormwater definitely needs to be on our radar also.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Any other concerns? I think our immediate concerns are the Buttermilk and the residential neighborhoods. Those are the things we've been putting the most time into, and then trying to bring along some of these other items on the list to a point where we can actually consider documents related to them. So anyway, that's the plan for 2024. We're already in March and moving right along. All right, any other comments about the project? Okay, so we're going to move on to our main topic for tonight, which is item number 6. And that's to come back to our discussion of the Buttermilk project on Julina Court. And as you notice, there are 3 memos about Buttermilk in the package for tonight. I really want to spend the majority of the time, based on recent information, on memo number 1. Memo number 2 and 3 are explanatory about some about the history, some about what happened at our January 17th meeting. I am hoping that people have read those and have just taken them in as documents to be filed as background, and that we can actually move along with our plans for Buttermilk with memo number 1. So I'd like to start there, and we can go back to those other memos if people really want to talk about them. But I don't think that we have unlimited time, and I would like to be able to make some progress here. So what I want to report to you is that I've had further conversations with a local commercial lender who's been in the business for many, many years, who says this is an extremely challenging commercial lending market right now. Costs of construction are super high. It's very difficult to know what projects are going to have economic value. The commercial component, as we know, is fallen through the floor. So I think that we really need to focus on key point number 1 in my memo 1, which is that we're not going to have building number 2 of Buttermilk unless it can be financed. There has to be an ability to make that into an economically viable project. So banks are looking to lend to projects that they think are going to have some economic value down the line so that the bank doesn't end up back with the project. So what that means for us is there aren't going to be 31 units if this project is not financeable. And I think we need to think about that as being the bottom line. It's really not, the market is not such that we can just say, this is what we want here, this is what we want there. If we want to have 31 units at least, we're going to have to be able to have a project that is financeable. So there are 2 things that we have to do. We have to get rid of the commercial requirement. We know that. We've already talked about that. We've agreed about that. And we need to be very careful what requirements we put that are going to take away any of the economic value of this project. So we need to think very carefully if we want to say, you know, how many affordable units, and we're going to talk about the meaning of affordable in a bit so that we're all clear on that. But we need to be very careful that we don't make it an impossible project to succeed if we want any units. So that's key point number 1. It has to be financeable. The second point is that we, as a planning commission, have committed ourselves to saying we want to help enable more housing. Not just affordable housing, any kind of housing. Vacancy rates are super low. People want to come here who have salaries. We have committed ourselves to saying we want housing. So if we want at least 31 units, then we need to make this a financeable project. So I would like to reset our discussion with those 2 things as ground zero, the bottom level of our discussion. And I would like to go from there. But Chris.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you're at
Yep.
home.
Okay.
Got home.
Yes, thank you for stating your position so clearly, Virginia. I have a similar but somewhat different position, and that is that while I agree that there is no realistic justification for the commercial requirement, it's only gotten worse now than it was when we first imposed it, however many years ago that was, and I would make the case it wasn't even realistic at that point. And I also agree that we as a committee support additional housing. Where I depart is the idea of housing of any type at all costs. And that right now, Richmond is on a path to becoming a high-priced suburb of Burlington. It will be a town where teachers, policemen, and our own children can't afford to buy houses. I mean, frankly, it's already largely that way. And it takes concrete steps for us to change that because the market is arrayed against us in that way. And so I would like to state my position as being that we should encourage housing that is affordable. And we'll talk about the meaning of affordable here. And I don't, but I want to be clear, not workforce, not small but expensive, which is what we've gotten so far, but housing that is by design and by regulation and by subsidy affordable to a more diverse population than the market forces are going to leave us with if we don't intervene. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have any comments? Just as a brief comment in response to that is the commercial lender that I've been speaking with does not feel that that is going to be a viable position going forward unless you can actually guarantee that there is that money that is going to come in to replace the money that's lost by the affordable housing. So anyway, and we have assumed that we have been told that this is not part of Buttermilk's proposal.
Well, I think where we were the last time we talked about this was that we wanted, my understanding anyway, was that there was a resounding support within the commission for exploring what the options actually were, not to simply dismiss them out of hand. I mean, I'm certainly at the point where I don't know that I understand all of the options for providing affordable housing. I've done some research since the last meeting. I sent some materials around. I thought we were going to do some more research on that, but you thought otherwise. And I think we've got a little bit more research that we could be doing here.
Anybody else have any comments?
Yeah, I do.
Ian?
It's my understanding that if we're gonna try to force Buttermilk to develop their property in a way that we see fit, that they're gonna walk away from it. Is that incorrect? I mean, just based on the letter that I read from them.
This has never been to have subsidized affordable housing, income sensitive, which we need to include if it's affordable, true HUD affordable housing is income sensitive, subsidized. This has never been part of their plan. They are interested in providing market rate housing that is, by virtue of the small size, more affordable than other housing. So they have, right now, they have a project. They have other, we don't know what is going to happen, but we are probably not going to have 31 units of housing unless we can give them a project that they can do. And the affordable housing is not on their list of things that they can do. So
Just that being said, and without due respect to what Chris is saying, it would be great if we could have more options for this particular property, but from the sounds of it, because ultimately they are private property owners and it's their right to do what they want, which we've all kind of acknowledged already. If it just doesn't seem like there are options to explore with this particular property.
I don't see, that's the point, is I don't know that we can say that flat out. I don't think we've explored what those options are. We know that Buttermilk is not a affordable housing developer and they have no interest in becoming one. But from the short discussions that I've had, I've learned about options for developing more affordable housing that I wasn't even aware existed before. And I think it's clear that we as a commission haven't explored those, though I thought we were on that path.
Yeah, I get, oh, sorry. I'm thinking more in terms of this property in particular. So are you talking, Chris, more broadly?
I'm talking about this property in particular. Well, just to give you an example, I mean, I think the idea, of working with a low-income housing agency and bringing in HUD subsidies to provide affordable rents in the long run. Not only is that not something that Buttermilk's not interested in, it doesn't even seem like there are options in Vermont, at least this is my limited understanding so far, that would fit with this property. So that seems like that's easy to dismiss. But there are options that would lead to paths for home ownership. For example, affordable home ownership, where funds are brought in to subsidize the purchase of the homes by the homeowners. And then the homeowners agree that when they sell the home eventually, not to price the home at market rates, or at least to return some of the revenues that they receive to a fund that enables the home to be sold at an affordable rate in the future. I believe that's similar to what we're already doing with some of the affordable homes that we have in town, although I don't know the details there, so don't take that for you take that with a grain of salt. My point really is, though, is that there's more options than I was aware of, more options than I think we've discussed in the commission so far. And my question is why wouldn't we explore these?
So the shared equity also involves working with an affordable housing developer. So the question is, we have Josie here, we can ask her, are you interested in working with an affordable housing developer in any way on this property?
Again, I don't think that asking Buttermilk, and no offense, Josie, at this point, before we've educated ourselves, is the right thing to do. I think that we need to understand what the options are and then have that discussion.
Well, I don't want us to waste our time going down roads that are dead-end roads. So we need to find out if the developer is interested in working in that way with either shared equity homes or with affordable HUD affordable homes with an affordable housing developer. So, I mean, why not ask the developer? The developer is here. Are you interested in working with a subsidized agency, a subsidized housing agency?
I think it's not a question about whether or not we're interested or not. It's that it's unviable of an option. And they're not interested. They, just as 2 points of data, we've already walked down this path several times and had good faith conversations. There's tons of notes from past planners who've had conversations. Richmond doesn't have the capacity to support that type of project. There isn't transportation, there isn't services, there isn't volume. Those are just basic things that they look for. Second, Champlain Housing Trust and those type of things want to own the property. That means what you guys were walking to the last time, forcing us to sell our property. That is not a possibility. And actually, just as a point of information, which you guys can research yourself, City Place in Burlington, downtown Burlington, Champlain Housing Trust was under contract and trying to negotiate a deal to offer affordable housing in the new development right on Church Street. And they were requiring to purchase or such a low price that they all imploded. And then actually the current developer, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, had to walk away from the entire affordable housing things. The mayor was out there apologizing and explaining how challenging the situation was. These are just the market realities. So
Yep.
That's before we even get our interest. We're an LLC, we're not a nonprofit. We are still carrying significant burden of cleaning up this project. 8 years ago, we partnered with you guys to change the zoning so it could be a cost-effective way to redevelop it. And we've still not been able to do that. And so to my question, it's not something that we can afford to do.
Yep. Okay. Great. Thank you. Joy, you had a point you wanted to make.
Well, before Josie started to talk and you called on her, I was going to say, I agree with Virginia that we should ask them.
Okay.
And Yeah, I would say that we had the same conversations that Josie's talking about. However, I don't know how long it's been that she's talked to them, but when we talked to them in the last year, our property wasn't as viable as something, say, in the middle of Richmond. So I think that the location is good for it. I think that maybe things have changed a little bit and they'd be more open to that location, but I do understand not wanting to sell. I think that when we talked to them, that was the only option, but I don't 100% remember. But anyway, I lowered my hand because you already dealt with it, so.
Okay, great. One other thing that I would say about home ownership is that I asked the local lender about condos, about having some condos as a path to home ownership, a path to wealth development. And he said it was problematic to have some units be condos and others be rental. So, having them all be condos is one thing. Having some be condos, there's a problem in that the management is conflicting. So in other words, the condo owners have a homeowners association, which would be responsible for the general maintenance and so on of the property. You also have, if you have some rental units, you have a landlord, an owner who is also responsible. So there's a conflict in who is doing what, and so lenders don't like that. So he felt that that was not an option of something that we could ask.
Well, I'm confused how we got to that point. I mean, we wouldn't be determining whether the building would be rental or condo, correct? I mean, that's outside of our purview.
Yeah, but some people had suggested that some of the units could be wealth building units. They could be condos. And I'm just saying that that's not really a realistic option, that we have those both kind.
So the way that condos generally work is that the homeowners association makes rules for the condo owners as to whether or not they're allowed to rent their units out to other people or not. And what's typical is that there's some kind of limit, either it's not allowed at all or some percentage of the units in the building, so that it doesn't change the character of the community that's there. But I would like to ask Josie a question. Josie, does Buttermilk have a vision one way that do you want to necessarily build a residential building and be the landlords of rental units, or build a residential building and sell it as a condo building, at market rates? Do you care between those two, or what's your vision?
So our permit currently is for rental units only. It's not for purchase. We've always, as I think I stated in the November meeting and the December meeting and the January meetings, is that we've always had a conversation in our community, in the investors and the partners, about whether or not we, into what Virginia was just saying, whether or not selling would help us enable this project to proceed. There is cash flow impacts. There's business impacts. You sell something, you never get that value back, right? And the reality is a lot of what we're doing is actually improving the value of Richmond. So we have tough conversations there. I have always wanted a path to ownership. It is more complicated. It brings in costs. I absolutely believe that in my tenor of who I am and what I'm trying to do for Vermont and for Vermonters and for Richmond, but it is complicated from a financing perspective. And part of the issue is that anything that is complicated brings cost. And right now, everything is in a very constricted way. So what I've always, I've read and what people have said is that if that is a model that a town wants to do, you got to put a giant carrot, because if it's just a stick, we're still in the same place that we were 5 years ago, that we can't proceed. If there's a carrot that enables us to cash flow it better, to finance it better, then there's an opportunity. But if we're just looking at it as a stick, I'm struggling even with the current situation. Like I just to be honest, if City Place can't do it in downtown Burlington, we have to be realistic about what's capable in Richmond, because they just don't have the volume. We don't have the volume. So anyways, so to my point is there's a intent and a wish to do those type of things, but that does not pay the bills. And that is where we're always, and I'm the one who runs those numbers and pushes that forward. And I got to say, it's becoming increasingly challenging.
Right. So, I've run those kinds of numbers too on projects, not real estate projects, but similar dynamics. And there's a price, right? That if that you have a revenue stream from a rental versus an upfront price from a sale, and you have your criteria for comparing the two, right?
And you have a higher cost of operating because you have condos and not,
Right.
there's a lot of complications. There's more in insurance things. There is a whole layer of complexity that brings a dollar sign with it, So that's just part of the tough reality. I would love it because I agree with you. When we were having those conversations about path to ownership, I fight hard for that as a human, but when you sit down with a bank and you're saying, I need to make this progress go forward.
Sure.
It's the pros and cons. So I go back to create a carrot.
Yeah.
That I can then create a business case out of.
Well, that's, and maybe I shouldn't have done this. I've assumed that that's what we would need to do. The situation that we're in right now is you have a business situation that doesn't work for you, and that you've got a requirement for this commercial space component that makes the project untenable. Okay.
Well, it doesn't work for anyone.
For anyone. Yeah, no,
because 5 years ago, we said that this was not going to be a possibility.
Right.
And the commercial requirements, I remember having conversations with you saying, we got bullied into the commercial. And I said, I do not think we're going to be moving forward. That was 5 years ago.
So I think we've all agreed that we're going to remove the commercial requirement, that this is something that doesn't make sense for Richmond or for this project. If we want to have more housing, we're going to need to do that. We're going to need to remove that requirement.
I would put it differently. I think we've all agreed that we will put that carrot on the table. At least that's what I've agreed to.
Yep. Well, I'm not sure that that's enough to make a viable project. And that is an option, that we can just remove the commercial requirement and have 31 units of housing, which is what we get.
Well, that's
the benefit that we get, is 31 units of housing.
So let's be very clear about what we're talking about. Is we could propose that to the select board, okay, and which is what we're going to do with anything that we do here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and there's a political reality to that also, as you and I have discussed. I don't know that we need to get into that now, but obviously we don't want to go to the select board with something that we don't think they're going to accept.
Right. We also don't want to go with a project that is not a viable project. That is not.
No, we wouldn't go with something that is not a viable project. What's the point in that? Have the select board approve something that Buttermilk isn't going to go with. Doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
But to be fair, Chris, that's what happened 4 years ago.
Well, no, you did go with it.
No, we didn't. Up until the last moment, we were absolutely very clear that it was going to be that commercial burden was going to make it unviable. And we've literally been saying that 3 months after, in the height of the pandemic, to help fund the housing survey, we wrote a letter in support saying we can't move forward with this project without a change in the commercial. So that I'm just saying, there is a level of understanding that we have to be realistic.
Oh, well, And,
So-
and I hope
And I feel like I've been trying to say what is realistic for a while, just for
Yeah.
to achieve what we kind of already agreed to.
And I hope, Virginia's been clear about this, and I hope I have been too. And I hope you remember that even back 10 years ago, I was calling that requirement unrealistic. You know, this is an issue whose time has passed, but there are long memories on the select board. There are arguments that need to be had there. And we all need to be in concert when we go to the select board if we want to relax that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I mean, I would like for us to have a shared understanding that that is an unrealistic requirement for this project. And if we would like to have at least another 31 units of housing, which we are committed to enabling in the center of Richmond, then that needs to go away. I mean, if it's an educational project that we have to take on to talk to the select board about it, it is a different environment from what it was, and it is worsening on a daily basis. The cost of construction is so high that it's very difficult to get banks to think that this is going to have value, this project. So, you know, to me, it's not a carrot. That's a reality of the situation that we're in. And, you know, we don't want it to be a hole in the ground there. We want to have 31 units of housing. So we need to recognize the reality on the ground, which is that requirement now and maybe forever wasn't a viable project builder. So if you can't get money from the bank, you can't make the project. So I think that's the reality on the ground. And, you know, what I would really like to get to is the point of talking about whether we want to just have 31 units or whether we want to have even some additional housing, for which we might, in some fairly minor way that doesn't disturb the bank too much, be able to get some items that we want, like the senior housing, adaptable housing. So I would like to get to that point. But Mark, do you have anything you want to say about this, or Joy, anything else?
Nope.
Nope.
No,
Okay.
I've said plenty in previous meetings.
I
Okay.
have something. I have a question. Usually
Ian.
I don't have anything to say. Usually I just have a question.
That's good.
It seems like Chris, obviously you have reservations about this currently. Is there anyone else on the commission that is feeling more aligned with Chris and his sentiments, or have we not
Ian,
heard from them?
If I may, and this is nitpicking a little bit, it's not that I have reservations about putting housing there. I agree that that would be a good idea to do. What I want to make sure, what I feel responsibility to do on the commission is to make sure that we've explored every and all options for making the housing that we put in as affordable as possible, and to realize our goal of having housing that teachers and policemen and young people can afford. If we just remove the commercial building requirements, we will get more housing similar to what we have now, which is attractive and wonderful. I mean, I like the housing that the Buttermilk put in, but I don't think it meets the criteria that I was talking about before. And that's not Buttermilk's fault. Don't get me wrong. It's the market. The market is inhumane at the moment, and I want to make sure we're using the resources that are out there in order to realize some of these other social goals, or at least exploring them.
Okay.
But I want
Yeah,
there to be more housing there.
Right.
I do want there to be more housing there.
I guess
So-
on
go
on
ahead,
that
Ian.
note too, I mean, there's a lot of talk about policemen and teachers being able to afford these apartments. As far as I know, I mean, teachers and public servants are earning decent salaries these days. I don't know that market rate apartments, at least as they're priced currently at the Creamery, are out of reach for those people.
We have a lot of teachers.
Yeah, I mean, they're paid
And we
well.
have a lot of families. We have a lot of new students. We have a lot of nurses. I don't think we have a police person, so I'm not going to lie. It's not in my skill set. But we have a lot of people, and the vacancy rate, like, has been really low. People have stayed for years. They're at various different incomes. I mean, I mean, I got to be honest. That's what we designed by purpose. I think it's actually based on a lot of theory that you have a range of different product at different sizes. You bring people in and they move around as their things. Girlfriends and boyfriends break up and one goes in one and goes in the other. And then it's the stickiness of the community to create some way that they stay and then they call. And the reality is that I have an ongoing list. I get about 10 to 15 emails a day, of people on the waiting list. They're all past kids of Richmond, wanting to find a place, and they want to get on the waiting list for next September, went on the waiting list for next November. Like, so it's a lot of that type of stuff. And I go back to some of the smaller units, which I understand. I think they're pretty small, but I've also lived in pretty small places over the last couple of years. And like, they're the most popular. And they're not just, as I pointed out in my last note, they're not, quote unquote, the lowest economic people. They're people, for whatever reason that they want to manage their cost, and they've gotten into the places and they barely leave those units. And again, the forecast and what we've put in and what I forecast is I would never put in a ton of those smaller units. I want a range. And, some of them with gardens. I mean, the plans, you can see the footprints, they're in the plans. Some with gardens for 2 kids, some of them with like larger alcove studios, blah, blah, blah. Anyways.
Yeah. So, this is a kind of housing that fills a niche. It is not buying a $600,000 single family home out in the hinterlands. It's providing housing that is, it's what we call a diversity of housing options. It's rental housing. It's not something that nobody can afford. We can think about the seniors who are trying to downsize just because they want to downsize and make available some of those single family homes. Some of these units may be agreeable to the seniors. So, it's not like this is a useless type of housing, and our housing crisis suggests that we need all this range of housing. It's not just affordable housing. We cannot fix the economy by by forcing someone to put affordable housing. We need a diversity of housing. We need all of these types of housing units. So, I don't understand why, Chris, you have a problem with thinking that this is somehow not useful housing for us to have.
I think
And
you're
let
putting
them
words
do
in
their
my mouth,
project.
Virginia. I never said that it was not useful housing. I said that why wouldn't we explore? If our interest is in really achieving a diversity of housing, why wouldn't we explore all of the resources available to achieve the greatest diversity possible?
Right. Well, the developer has said that it is not a viable project for them to involve a subsidized, income-sensitive housing model, that kind of affordable housing. So I think we can take that off the table.
I
We
think
have
what we've
what
heard
we have
from
left
Josie
is
is
workforce housing, which
well,
is
I don't recognize the term workforce housing. Can we just push that aside? We've got market housing, which is what we have in Richmond, and we have some small amount of subsidized housing. Now, you've talked about shared equity, which was the thing that I learned about for the first time talking to Champlain Housing Trust. And it sounds like, Josie, that's not something that you've considered so far, right? Because my understanding was you had a meeting scheduled with was it Champlain Housing Trust that never happened a few years ago? I'm sorry, I don't really know the details there.
So Jess Draper was setting up a meeting in 2019. I never saw the notes. All I know is that we absolutely were going to participate in that meeting, and Bard was going to be there, and they couldn't schedule it. And from my understanding, in Jess's email, so you guys have more information than I do. I'm just telling you what the information I was given is that Jess had a meeting with them and said it wasn't like that they were not interested. And since I mean, it's a common conversation. It's not new. They need volume. They want to own the property. They want volume of units, which we can't even get through 31 units, right? When I'm talking volume, like lots, Revy and I had a call with the Vermont Finance Agency in 2022 or 2021. I can't even remember. But again, I sent those notes in yesteryear in these discussions, and we had a conversation with them with two of their kind of directors to give us like, what are the ways that we could finance this creatively to put more affordable? And he said the only way, because of the location, because of the size, and because of the volume that we're talking about, because it's sub 100 units, is density bonuses. That was the only recommendation. And that notes, I know that Revy took them and sent them off to whomever was part of that. And that's kind of playing out in all markets, right? And that's the reality. So if you want to, if you're asking about I think you said shared ownership.
Yeah, shared equity
Shared
ownership.
Shared equity. That has to have a third party nonprofit involved. And based on my case studies of now multiple years and multiple conversations and other stuff going on the market, I just don't know if that's going to be, I don't feel like we're going to make any headway on it, and again, we've walked down this path again, and we put resources and we put time and we put focus on it, and we get a big no. And I just don't know if that they could participate in the way that would enable us to still cash flow.
Right. Well,
and it's really, I know that's hard. And I had conversations with my banker a couple of months ago and say, here's all the situation. And he the same thing that Virginia was saying. It's a common discussion. There's great intent. If there was big money that was coming from state or from HUD, and remember, we got $650,000 of HUD money. I've been through that process. I know the players. I know the people. There is no money for this type of size project in Richmond. You don't have public transport. You don't have social services. They want to put their money where they know that they're going to have people.
I know that that's certainly true for the low-income agency owned and rented properties. But from my discussion with Champlain Housing Trust, again, very limited conversation, it seemed that the story was very different for the shared equity ownership situation. But I guess what I'm getting back to the same question again. We've got bits and pieces of information from meetings that some happened, some didn't. All of them seem to have been some time ago. And the thing that I don't understand, Virginia, is the resistance to gathering more information. Why wouldn't we do that?
Because I think that we have enough information to determine that having a third party involved is not a viable path forward. It is.
How do you come to that determination? We don't even know the details.
Because the developer is not interested. The developer is not interested in having a third party nonprofit involved, which all of these affordable housing strategies involve that. So why go down that road? We're delaying, we're not making any forward headway in this situation. It's just another kind of delaying tactic that is not going to go anywhere.
I don't appreciate my asking questions being referred to as delaying tactic. I think that's the role of the members of the commission.
Okay, well, does anyone else have anything they would like to say here?
Do we all have to agree?
No.
Well, we
move
have to
forward?
come to some kind of conclusion as to where, as to where we're going. Are we going to move forward with thinking about whether or not we want to add some density here, which is the next step? We have kind of come to the agreement that removing the commercial requirement is a legitimate thing for us to be doing and is appropriate for the situation on the ground at the moment. And so the question is, do we want to have 31 units? Do we want to have more than that? Would we like to have some more units? And is there, using extra units, is that enough of a carrot to get some of the units that we might think are, they can be what I would like us to think of. And I disagree with Chris that there are two ways of using affordable, and I guess we could talk about that. There's the true affordable, which is income sensitive, subsidized in general, the true HUD type of affordable units. There are also units that are affordable by some other mechanism. For instance, being fairly small. That's a kind of affordable, which actually can look like on the VHFA chart, 80% of AMI. There's no income sensitive piece, so it's not true affordable housing, but it has the appearance of that because the rent is somewhat controlled at a lower level. So that's kind of a midway point of affordable. And then there's what people out in the community talk about, which is like more affordable than some other things. So, we just want to keep all those things straight. And the middle kind, where there's some kind of rent control mechanism, seems like it might be a possibility for a small number of units if we can give enough units to make up the lost income there. There's no third party, there's no subsidies, there's no other money coming in. So you have to make, there be whatever you can give, which is more units to make that work. There are things like senior housing, which I have guidelines about, which is a little easier apparently for commercial lenders to accept if we have a small number of senior units, which are adaptable. They have bars in the shower and stuff like that. That's a one-time cost for the developer. It's going to be a little easier for the lenders to stomach that. So, and what we have to bargain with is additional units. So, yeah, any commissioners want to weigh in? All right, Brendan. Brendan, go ahead. You had something you want to say?
Yep. I just was curious, and I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with any of the pushes on affordability or something, but I'm just wondering, since Chris, you were talking about it, and I was late. Sorry, I had to work at another meeting. But is there other communities that you've seen that have greatly benefited from Cathedral Square and those situations? And I just was wondering, in really short, very short, what's the analogy of how it would be better for Richmond than just what we're proposing, and just why we'd want to spend like a pile of time with it or not, and just like why would it be beneficial for Richmond versus what's there right now versus what we're proposing? In short,
that's a good question, and the answer is, just speaking for me, is I don't know, because I don't have enough information. We had agreed at the last meeting of the commission, that there was going to be some exploration. That didn't happen. I've since done a very little bit of it myself. It feels like Virginia doesn't want to even find out what the options are. But I want to make it clear, it's not because of any dissatisfaction with what you've built so far. I like what's there, okay? As a matter of fact, you know I've been involved with this project since the inception.
Yep.
I really see your company's involvement and what we managed to achieve is a real win for Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure that in the face of this crisis that I think we've all acknowledged here, that when we look to the next step, that we're making use of all the resources that are available and acceptable. I mean, obviously it's got to be acceptable to you too, to enable as much income diversity there as we can. I mean, I feel like Virginia, you're calling market rate housing by a bunch of different names. It just muddies the water. It's multifamily, a market rate housing, which means that by definition, it's more affordable than single family market rate housing. That's good. We need more multifamily market rate housing, but that doesn't fill all of the needs because of the way that the housing market has become so distorted in not just Vermont, but practically the entire country right now. So all that I'm asking is why wouldn't we explore the resources that are available? And I believe it's actually the responsibility of the commission to do that.
For me, my experience has been like with those bigger organizations. It's just I went through a long process in Burlington with a partner there, and it was interesting. He was very successful with getting subsidized housing in an area in Winooski, and to me it just muddied the water with like a lot of people, a lot of involvement, a lot of barriers, a lot of time, and I don't know, trusting the process. If you're in good hands in some ways, like you said, I think it bodes well to say, like, you like what we've done, you like where it's been, you want the best for Richmond, obviously, and that's why you're still involved, and you're involved in the commissions, and you're very passionate, and that getting other people involved, it doesn't necessarily carry all of those same thoughts. And the more people you have, if you've ever been on, the bigger the board is you're on, the less it gets done. And it's like, and then there's all the little focus groups, and so any rate, it just muddies the waters in terms of the process. And so, like, I've never felt like it was a great thing. I like to just carry out more my vision, our vision. Hopefully it resonates with the community's needs and wants, but it streamlines the process and just gets the job done. And I think we've displayed that in building one. It's like there's plenty of affordable apartments there. It was never a mandate, and continues to be, well below AMI. And whether it can be afforded to do that, it's hopefully that's the case. I support, the plenty of Venezuelan and people that have been coming to Vermont for work and trying to support their families, and then trying to find them places to live and make it affordable, and it's challenging. And so we put them up in places. And so, sure, would we do that? But do I want other people dictating it all the time and telling us what to do? And when we were involved from ground zero and had the vision and got the money and cleaned it up and built it out, and that's harder. It's just taken so long, as you know. And so that's all. I wanted to keep it as simple as possible, and at least get to building 2 if we can, so we can start doing something in terms of not losing money.
Thanks, Brendan.
So I think the question for us is, are we going to allow Buttermilk to do the project that they want to do, that they have signed up to do, that they have made a lot of plans for doing. Do we want to let them do their project? And we need to get on with it if we want to do that. So,
I'm sorry, I don't think that's the decision we're making. I think that we are all in agreement that we want there to be further development on the site. That's not the issue. The question is how. How do we do that? And do we cut off the process now and make a recommendation to the select board based on the information and discussion we've had so far? Or do we feel that there still are questions that we want to answer and take time to discuss? That's the discussion. Am I wrong? Or is that really the decision that we have to make?
Mark,
Yes, thank you. Actually, I just went to do a thumbs up and,
Oh.
and not raise my hand because I agree
Oh.
with Chris's question or statement that we do want development there. And you know, and I don't think we want to just pass it on at this point. I think we need some additional discussion about what it is that we're going to recommend to the town and the select board be put there. I think, and gosh, I really hope the committee has finally come to terms with the fact that there is not going to be organized, subsidized housing on this property. It's not going to happen. We have to come to that realization and let that go, and then move forward with what it is we do want to allow there and what it is we would want in return for the modifications to the zoning that we're looking at making. We're already going to have to rezone this district just to get rid of the commercial, even if we allow 31 units. Just the 31. So we're already making a concession to what the zoning was set up to be however many years ago when we all agreed that this was the path forward. So now we're at the point where what changes do we practically want to expect? Affordable housing isn't it. We're going to have to rely on the kindness of the developers to provide whatever housing at whatever rates they are, but there is no government, there is no town of Richmond mechanism for controlling what they're going to be charging for what they're going to be doing. There may be some control over the type of housing that we allow. If we allow 71 units or 72 units, I think is one of the proposals, we can pretty much guarantee they're all going to be shoe boxes, and therefore workforce affordable homes, living spaces, if you can call it that, on the same footprint. If we went with 31 units, additional units, which is the current zoning of 15 units per acre, then 31 units on that property would probably be more of a mix of, again, some workforce housing that affordable in the sense that they'd be very small spaces, and therefore they'd only be able to charge so much for those small spaces. But they would also be encouraged probably to have some larger units that would be higher rent, more units, more bedrooms per unit, that would perhaps maybe bring in some young families and other combinations of roommates and friends and whatever it would take to afford that housing. I mean, I think the Housing Commission, thank you, Virginia, I think in your crew handed out some flyers at the town meeting that really got me thinking about what's affordable, what's out there. How, right now, what was there? How many houses were sold for under $300,000 in Richmond in the last 5 years or something? It's a ridiculous number. you know, a $300,000, $400,000 home, you're looking at with today's interest rates, I'm maybe Buttermilk has more definitive numbers, but you're looking at $4,500 to try and buy a home in Richmond. If apartments that are 2 bedrooms where a young family can get started is renting for $3,500, it's going to be less than what it would take to get a $400,000 home in Richmond, which really a $400,000 home isn't that big. I live in one. It's not an impressive thing. It shouldn't be $400,000. Taxes and reassessments bump that up, but it's not a huge living space. My point is we need to start moving forward on what we're going to allow for the number of units and what we're going to ask in return for the modifications in the zoning that would in some way benefit the town. Not going to benefit the town in low income housing. Would it benefit the town if there were elderly accessible? Maybe we could look into that a little bit, but we need to start moving this conversation forward. It's been an hour and we're at the same point we were when we started, and same point we were months ago, if not years ago, with the status of affordable housing. It's a dead issue with this property, and we need to move past that and go forward in more constructive about what else are the other options and what do we want.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. So is there anyone who is opposed, except for Chris, for moving forward, talking about the density, what kind of density we want to add? Is there anyone who is opposed to just getting into that discussion?
I'm not opposed to getting into that discussion.
Okay, great. Let's get into that discussion. So let's talk about density. And if you remember, a few months ago, we talked about either just removing the commercial requirement. We didn't talk about anything else, like parking or amenities or anything like that. We talked about possibly increasing the density to match the density of the downtown district, which would be going from 15 units per acre to 24 units per acre. That's going to give them an additional 27 units. There's any number in between there. There's, increasing the base density to, let's say, 20 units per acre. We could have a density bonus strategy where any units after that, we could think about, for instance, the senior or aging in place or adaptable senior units. We can think about the question of whether the workforce, I know you don't like that, Chris, but that's what I'm talking about when it's not income sensitive. It's just that there are, the units rent is capped at a certain amount. That is something that we could monitor in the town of Richmond. It's fairly simple. We have to be very careful how many of those that there wouldn't be many of those that would be it would be permissible to cap like that, because that's an income restricting thing. And the bank is going to say, well, we can't restrict the income. It's already, the costs are too high. So, amenity.
Let me ask about that, because I don't want us to consider something we don't even have the legal ability to do. I mean, Keith, maybe you can address this. My understanding is the town of Richmond can't do what Virginia just described of basically exercising rent control in the town of Richmond. We don't have We don't have any of the enabling legislation for that, right?
You're muted. Yeah.
Yeah. We certainly don't have that promulgated right now. That's for sure, Chris. Obviously, it would have to be vetted through town council. But I don't think there's any preclusion to that, and it's an easy mechanism by which to enforce on a yearly basis. But we would again need to vet that through council, though, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what it would involve is just an annual statement that this is the rent, this is the type of unit. It's whatever 80% of AMI or whatever off the chart, but without the income sensitive piece. Anyway, something to consider, not that, it's any of these things detract from its desirability from a bank's point of view. So we just have to be really careful. And
can I ask a question, Virginia?
Yeah.
Which option would give them the most flexibility, like to build out as many units as possible?
Well, what would give them the most flexibility is to give them a new density number. So,
Right.
For instance, right now the density
What's the highest number we could give them?
Sky's the limit. We can give them
within reason.
Within reason. I mean, we can give them any density number that we wish. The Jolena Court district is a separate district. Nobody else is affected except for the Richmond Community Kitchen. We can put a density number on there that we think is reasonable for that space. So, the downtown district with the 24 units per acre seems like a logical and easy maneuver to make.
Sure.
That's the density that we already have in our zoning. It relates to the downtown. We would just be joining this district to the downtown district. But other people, for instance, Revy, our previous planner, have thought that this piece of land could support many more units than that. So it's a political question, kind of, how many units do we think are suitable there?
I would propose, I mean, this is probably not going to be real popular, but I would propose that we give the highest number possible. And then being a private real estate development project, it becomes their problem about how they divide up their building, as it should be, in my opinion. And if they make a mistake, they're not going to make money.
So,
Yeah. Well, could I just respond to that briefly, Ian? So
Yep.
The footprint of the building is proposed to remain the same. So if we were to give them, let's say, 50 units per acre as a density, they would put a certain number of those units into building 2, and they would most likely reserve some of those units for future phases of their development, building 3 and 4, which exist on a master plan. So, what would go into building 2 would be limited by that building footprint. Presumably, they would keep that same building footprint. Josie, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify that. So just as a reminder, because we put together a proposal just to make life easy, right? And we never, we don't want to flood the market with tiny, small units. The market would not create it. So your point is accurate, right? And so when we did a quick exercise, I mean, what we're trying to do is try to provide housing based on a building that has been long under construction. We've sunk a lot of cost in it. And how would we use that? We'd still commit it. We still believe that there's some commercial opportunity there. We want to have a gym. There's other smaller things that there's other opportunities that are coming up. So what we looked at in the last proposal if the density was equal to the downtown village, we'd probably look at, and this is not us looking at it with an architecture, we don't want to spend any more money off of planning this, is around 50 units in that next building. We wouldn't use the rest of them. We would have units left for future buildings. And to your point, what we would actually look at is really look at what is the right mix to have the right viability.
Great. Chris?
Thanks. Josie, remind me also, what is the maximum number of units until it would trigger a next a follow-on traffic study?
Oh, good question. So it's great question. I looked at that based on if we just replace, because actually the complexity thing is that what we're going to be talking about is removing the commercial volume and replacing it residential. So there's actually just a shift in car traffic. And I know this is surprising for people, but the regulation is 70 PM trips, right? And actually the biggest burden on those PM trips is actual commercial demand, not residential, because actually the majority of people are working from home these days and the whole idea is that people would be able to walk and like have more things. Now, so when we looked at the rough volume of this, building 2 certainly would not trigger that regulation. Building 3 and 4, I think we would have to relook at it based on whatever mix we got to, right? Because who knows, remember the whole process was slow growth. We build this next building and then we all take a deep breath and figure out what do we want, right? And what's right. Maybe the commercial market comes back. Maybe something else happens. Maybe we find a funder to help us do, for purchase affordable housing. I don't know. Because that is part of the problem that we've had is having a planned unit development where I'm supposed to be forecasting 20 years in the future when 8 years we've not been really able to move is a challenge, and so that's where we're balancing those things. So,
Yeah.
And Revi did do a study. Yeah, go ahead. Go
Well,
ahead.
I just wanted to respond to Ian earlier. I think the reason I asked that question is that, again, we're operating in a political context, so we don't get to have the final say. I think if I can restate your question, Ian, it's what do we want to propose to the select board, and what do we think we can make a good enough case for at the select board that it will get through? And I'm anticipating that the select board's questions are going to be primarily around infrastructure. I think that we get more involved in the, questions about, how many units are appropriate per acre, that kind of thing. But they're going to be saying, well, what about cars coming in and out? What about how much excess capacity do we have on the water and sewer system? Those are the kinds of questions I'm anticipating. Tell me if you're wrong, Virginia, but I think, they'll want to get into that. And so we want to have I actually like what Josie just said. I think that's a great way to present it, saying you don't have to buy the whole cow right now. You can buy part of it, see how you like it, and move on to the next one. And I don't think, on off the top of my head, on the 2 things that I touched on there, well, Josie covered traffic. I don't think we're coming anywhere close to using up the excess capacity on the water and sewer system with phase 2 or unit 2 that you just described. So.
Yeah, and I'd also like to mention that Revi did have a traffic study done by CCRPC that compared the traffic with the commercial or with that space being used as residential. And it was a wash, pretty much. The traffic was a wash because all that commercial traffic was gone. And now there was the morning and evening commutes. So we can dig that study up.
I'd love a copy. I don't think I've ever seen that. I'd love a copy
Put
of
it
that.
out there.
Thank you.
So that's in terms of traffic.
And then parking, Chris, just because the other thing I think people are going to talk about infrastructure, and I know we've talked about it 150 times, so I'm just going to put it out there just to remind. Even in our last PUD, we oversupplied parking. So we were actually, with the full site build out, we were, I think, somewhere 20 spaces extra. So parking is not, especially for building 2, there's going to be no restrictions around that at this stage. We do have to take in the cost of actually inputting all of that and managing it and paving it and all of that stuff. But that's another question I know that probably the select board will bring up. At least they did in the past.
Sure, yeah.
And one thing that happens with parking is that with Act 47, the requirement for any residential building on water and sewer is 1 parking space per dwelling unit. So your 2-bedroom that may have required 1.5 or 2, I forget which, parking spaces can only statutorily now require 1 space for any dwelling unit. So that, it's not currently written that way in our zoning yet because we haven't gotten around to putting it in, but it was the law starting in July of 2023 that 1 parking space is going to be required. So, I think that we're going to have to look at how many commercial spaces, that's an overcomable problem. So, and probably doesn't mandate any particular density. Mark.
Thank you. I would just say that when it comes to housing, even if they only put in 31 units and they only have to put in 31 parking spaces, there's going to be more than 31 cars in that building. I find it hard to believe that people could think otherwise, because even in a 1-bedroom or a loft, you're going to have couples, and not all of them are going to work in Richmond. There's only so many jobs in Richmond, which means that they're going to need to travel, and they're not taking a bus. They're going to be driving a car. So the state mandates a 1 parking space per residential unit, but that doesn't mean that that is a practical application, nor does it mean that we couldn't, in our negotiations, agree to additional public parking spaces of really any number, but I would like to think that we would at least be considering a number of public parking spaces that would enable parking for the overflow of the 31, say, parking spots that are going to be there, that are going to be occupied. So we only mandate 31. Well, we could then counter offer as part of the negotiations an additional, I don't know, I don't even know what these numbers are, 15 public parking spaces that would at least allow the overflow of parking from this building we're allowing them to build to not overflow and cramp the extremely limited public parking we have in the rest of town. Now, granted, yes, it's absolutely true. This first building, you're throwing it out there, there's still going to be lots of parking. There's a lot of open area there. People can just pull in whatever, and it's not going to be an issue. But at some point down the road, there's going to be buildings 3 and buildings 4, where the parking becomes quite competitive. And the free space just disappears. Mandating public parking at least ensures us of a certain number of extra spots that will keep people from parking in public parking. So I don't know what those numbers are, but I definitely want to make sure that that becomes part of our conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mark, do you have any feeling about density?
Oh, I absolutely do. You know what it is too. I am extremely concerned about going over the defined 31 units that are already zoned. But I'm hearing a lot of people saying, oh, the sky's the limit, or kicking it up to, going from 45 to 72 units on that piece of property coming out of that lot. And maybe it doesn't satisfy the 70 unit 70 trips for a threshold for a traffic study, but you also have the Railroad Street where Richmond Hardware is and the grocery store and all of that, and that traffic coming in, and there's actually a lot of developmental land there. So I'm talking two things. I'm talking one, just the number of cars coming out of that piece of property are going to have an impact on traffic. And I would really like to hear from the neighbors who travel that path before we go any further than 31. I don't want to come up with a number of whatever, an additional 40 units, and then come to the public and say, this is what we're going to do. I want to hear from the public and say, how do you feel about that beforehand? And then when it comes to a traffic study, I think there's got to be some serious consideration about some sort of cost sharing with the other development. Maybe we don't hit the 70 car threshold that our current zoning mandates, but this is a brave new world where everything's on the table. We're rewriting zoning for them. So do we make it part of some shared traffic study, traffic costs? Should additional traffic be generated from the Railroad Street property? Because we're at 70, whatever. Oh, we're only at 69. No worries. Somebody puts in an apartment, an accessory dwelling over on Railroad Street, and all of a sudden you're at 70 trips. You, with the accessory dwelling, have to pay for a full traffic study in order to do that. I think that's a factor, and I don't know what the logistics around that are. I'm going to leave it to the professionals, but I think that that's going to be a consideration now or in the near future, and it shouldn't fall all on the shoulders of the next person who puts it over that tipping point when we're putting them so close to the tipping point already.
Okay. Joy, do you have anything that you want to say about density here?
Yeah. I mean, are we
Yeah.
looking to close this out today? Definitive answer and move
No.
on? Okay.
Not really.
Um,
I mean,
yeah.
we kind of have to
At some point we need
think
to
about
though,
that.
right?
Yes. At some point we need to. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, I think that we need the density. It makes me nervous. I mean, I've already been a proponent of no commercial and turning that into residential. So I feel like we've already done a lot. I like sitting back and listening to these conversations, and helps me think about it as we, move forward. So I don't know that I'm ready to weigh in on anything right now.
Okay.
Can I add something real quick?
Yes, go ahead, Keith, please.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, for me, and I'm not a voting member, obviously. I'm looking for forward motion, and I would love nothing more than to get the thumbs up to start promulgating and get some draft language to you folks. And that is really where you start getting that gray matter going when you see it on paper. And then you start editing it, and you have your conversations, and we can do that in real time. That's really what I'm trying to push for as your planner. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Ian, do you have anything else you want to say about density?
Yeah, if we ended up going with 15 UA, 31 units, 46 parking spaces, and we all agreed on that. If they wanted more at some point, they can come back to the planning commission or not.
No, that'd be a DRB decision.
Well,
We don't-
for building 2, are you talking about, or in
Yeah.
general in the grand scheme of things?
So, like if they used up all the numbers in building 2.
So if we altered the zoning that took away the commercial requirement,
Yep.
left the same density that is there right now, reduced the parking requirement by Act 47's mandate, then they would have to go back to the DRB. Presumably, would you have to go back to the DRB if we just removed the commercial? I think they'd have to go back to the DRB and amend the
Yes.
development plan and so forth. They could go forward with that.
So if we make a determination on density, it's not like the end of the story for them, per se.
Well, they don't want to have to come back to the planning commission for more density for building 2. You know, this is the shot that we have to increase the density in building number 2. If they wanted more density for building number 3 or 4, more residential, less commercial for building 3 or 4, then they would have to go through this whole process again, which might make, you know, everyone a little crazy. But anyway, so this is our chance to say, we've got the village here, we've got water and sewer, we've got room in our school. Why can't we have more housing here? This is our chance. We could just say, okay, we'll take away the commercial and that's what we want to do. I think personally that we have an opportunity here to enable a little bit more housing. But
Well, I've got no objection to Keith doing what he's talking about doing.
to putting some language in place in the zone, to take the zoning and edit it with new language. Is that what you're saying would be fine? And then we can talk about it
Taking
more
into
then?
consideration the points that we've discussed here tonight. Yeah.
Okay. So are you, for instance, in favor of keeping it at 31, or would you like to do something else?
I'm in favor of keeping it at 31.
Brendan has his hand up.
Yeah, Brendan, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just wondering, I think I'm not positive. We've looked at this a few times for building 2, and because we didn't want to waste a lot of time sketching in the units and trying to figure out how big the gym is. And it's not 70 units in building 2 by any means. But it could be whatever, 4, 5, 7 more units. I don't know. I was always confused a little bit. So like I was wondering about either do we modify it right now just so we have the flexibility to put a few more units in building 2 if such is the case, is it a number? And I haven't even had a chance to talk to Josie about that. And then that was a question. And I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I've said this to you before, Virginia. I truly didn't understand why the property actually is penalized by having the most parking in town amongst all the neighboring properties right around us that have double the density. I mean, I'm not ever saying that Dan Noyes might decide to bulldoze a lumberyard and put up a 2-store building and underground parking, but he's got double the density then. So I didn't really conceptually understand that. Don't know if I don't want to really get into that right now. That's why I thought it was a no-brainer to be like, well, of course they should have the same density as downtown. Don't know why that ever was enacted. It was part of was always industrial, then went to residential, and then we got a limit on it. But to me, that was like the lowest hanging fruit of everything. I still don't understand why it's even a debate on that front, just because it's the most parking of anywhere downtown. It's equal to all the public parking downtown in total. So I guess I would have to have the conversation with Josie. It's like, or we do and ask for a few more units just to maximize and understand what the best way to go about building 2 is, because we'll never need that density right now. And if you guys aren't comfortable with approving that, then we'd have to come back for 3 and 4, however the economy changes and evolves, etc. Maybe we don't ever need it because the whole commercial world changes. Don't know, but that was it. Those 2 kind of quick global questions.
So I guess I don't have any answers to the questions? I mean,
think
what
the
are the
difference
questions?
Anybody feel like, is there real simply, why would this property be penalized for having the most parking downtown versus equal to the neighbor's density?
Maybe, Virginia, if I may, Brendan, I think you're addressing it as a fairness issue. And I think that the select board and the planning commission looks at it as a total resource issue. The total resource being the total amount of parking available in downtown. Is that a fair way to characterize it, Virginia?
Well, except that this is their property.
Yeah,
We
but
have all the
It's
parking.
not a resource to the town. It's not exactly a resource to the town. It's a resource to this property. But, you know, it is possible that we can suggest that there be some public parking, whether it's paid public parking or non-paid public parking. We can certainly suggest that. One thing I would like to add to what Ian said is, so if we say we're going to keep it at 31 units, what will happen presumably is that they're bigger. Those, you know, in order to fill now this commercial space that we've removed, they're going to be bigger units and they're going to be more expensive units to a certain extent. So if we allow them an additional, whatever, 5 units, 10 units, you know, some number of units, then they can have more of those mix with the small units that actually provide more housing. So that would be a reason to possibly increase it, you know, because we are freeing up this space. So either the number of units stays at 31 and they're all bigger, or we have a mix. So anyway, that's just one thing. Mark, you had a point?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think the reason why we held the density to a lower number is exactly to your comments that, you know, it's been an evolution of development from a 100% commercial property. Limitations of that and the concerns about the impact of the density changes, the traffic, all that kind of stuff that comes with the added houses. So that's certainly part of it. The other part of it is that the unit that has 24 units per acre, the reason why that's 24 units per acre is because a few years ago we changed the zoning up to 24 units per acre because the building had 24 units per acre already and it had been there for 100 years. So rather than keeping them in out of compliance with zoning and making them go before the DRB every time they did any little thing, we agreed that, okay, it's a footprint lot. The apartments are already there at 24 units per acre. Let's just bump it up to 24 units per acre. Not that we think that 24 units per acre is a healthy density for all of downtown Richmond, not downtown as in the downtown district, but in the entire village. You know, 24 units per acre is not a healthy density that I think the community would want to propagate throughout Richmond. So
No, it's not. It's not suggesting that we do it throughout Richmond either. It's just
but
in this
we're doing
district.
we're doing it here now at this district also, and what's next and why this district? Is this really the best district to kick up to 24 units per acre where it is? Those are legitimate concerns and questions that I really hope you give the opportunity of the community to chime in on before we go too much further down the increased density conversation.
Okay. Josie, go ahead.
Quick question. So in that scenario, that was a helpful background, Mark. I appreciate that. That there was one building that was that caused the increase, because I do remember the increase happening. But does that mean that it actually increases the density for all other properties within that district as well?
Mhm.
That's the district. The village is pretty much that in the block. And then we
But
decided
there's
Well,
other
it's not-
buildings that
it
are,
was literally just the block at one point.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
just the block. That's
then-
the district that has that density, is the
got
one
it. So it's
block
not
on
one
Street.
building that has
it is
20,
that it was that one building.
the brick building.
Yeah, and we didn't have any parking requirements for that one building because it was already a footprint. So there was no way that they could possibly provide the required parking spaces because they didn't have any other property. We expanded that to across the street.
Mhm.
And then I have a second question, and it's a question because clearly we're not ending this today.
Yeah.
But if you guys, I'd like to, how would, if this concept of public parking and parking for other neighbors is actually a thing that gets more interest, how does that impact both traffic and understanding of traffic? How do we evaluate that compared to what our traffic is and our commercial tenants, and how I think that needs to be factored in, right? Because I mean, part of the point is that if, for example, you guys want 20 spots, I think, did someone say 20 spots? You know, and then Richmond Community Kitchen wants 20 spots. That's actually more than our current required amount, right? And that's going to be a lot of traffic, and I want to make sure that that's factored in. That those impacts that we have to bear the brunt of doing the studies and having the discussion and having the infrastructure discussion, these need to be discussed at your level as well.
But you're not doing the studies yet.
Yeah, we did.
Well, you did, but it's irrelevant because you're not going to be doing another one for this project going forward. I don't think there's any
well, if you guys require that amount of spaces, we might have to.
Yeah, well, I mean, you add another however many, but the extra public parking, and I say public, really, if nothing more, is just design with the minimum, the intention of one, ensuring that we have something for the Richmond Community Kitchen, because that building is also a footprint lot and has no parking, and it would be nice to have some slots for them, which they're already using and you have graciously allowed them to use as part of your private parking, and you've granted them permission to use that for the time being. But what happens when we get to a heavier density and all of a sudden, sorry, we need this space for this parking for our buildings, and Richmond Community Kitchen and the historic Blue Seals Feeds building becomes worthless, unusable. So, but then also really to the point of Act 47 and the single parking unit. And like I said, you tell me 31 units, 31 additional units on top of what we have here, or what you have already. So say we're at 45.
Okay, so we're gonna have to, we're at 9 o'clock, so
Let me make this very quick point.
yeah, we can talk about this more next time.
45 units is going to have more than 45 cars. So the extra public parking isn't actually public parking for the rest of the community. It's just keeping the extra vehicles from this development out of the few public parking spaces that the community is already using. Thank you.
Yep, okay. So we're gonna have to carry this discussion on to next time. We will try to put together some kind of alterations to the document. If we want to talk about it that way, that's fine. Chris?
Did we agree that Keith should go ahead and prepare draft changes, at least to get that ball rolling so we all know what parts of the zoning we're talking about?
Does anybody object to us taking the current 3.9 section of the zoning and putting in some changes for us to talk about? Does anybody object to that for our next meeting? I'm not hearing any objections. So, yes, are you okay with that, Chris?
Well, I mean, I think it's part of the process. We want to change the zoning. The question is just
Exactly. Yeah, so, we can either talk about it like this, like we've been doing, or we can put it into the format of a document change that we
I
would
like it better in
suggest.
the document. I'd like to vote for starting to get it written up and we can redline it, and I like Keith's idea.
yeah,
Okay,
that same here.
good. Well, let's do that. We will do that, and yeah, we'll work on that, and Chris, you'll be involved in getting that material as the vice chair. So good luck with that.
Well, and I would like to request some time on the agenda next time because I intend to complete the research that I thought we were going to do. And I'll have information ready to present at the next meeting.
Okay, and we can discuss the other items that we didn't get to today, and move on from there. So,
Okay.
great.
I would like to move we adjourn.
Is there a second to that?
Second,
Okay, Joy is seconding it. Is there anyone who is opposed to us adjourning at this point? All right, so we stand adjourned. I would like to know who Rachel's iPad is so that we can put it in the minutes. Rachel, somebody. Can you tell us who you are?
You need to unmute yourself first.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll just have to put in the minutes that Rachel's iPad was present. So that's the best we can do. So great. Thank you all for coming, and see you here
All right, have a
on
great night, everyone.
Yeah, you
April
too. Good night.
3rd.
Good night, everyone.
Yep,
Thanks,
great.
Virginia.
good night.
Thanks a lot.